In the annals of history, few organizations have wielded the power to shape young minds as effectively and terrifyingly as the Hitler Youth. It was an era where innocence was replaced with indoctrination, and the dreams of youth were overshadowed by the nightmares of ideological brainwashing. Born out of a desire to create an unwavering generation of Nazi loyalists, the Hitler Youth ensnared the lives of countless German teenagers, turning classrooms into breeding grounds for extremism. From the moment Adolf Hitler seized power in 1933, the Hitler Youth became a key instrument in the Nazi regime, indoctrinating boys and girls with fierce nationalism and blind obedience. In 1936, at a Nazi party rally, there was a major incident where more than 900 girls from the BDM, League of German Girls, became pregnant, sparking a considerable scandal. Many of the girls, though not the majority, experienced pressure to engage in sexual activities or were forced into it. This coercion sometimes came from members of the Hitler Youth, and in other instances, from significantly older men. Consequently, a majority of these girls were compelled to undergo abortions, regardless of their personal wishes regarding the procedure. Here, childhood's end came too soon, replaced by the harsh realities of a regime that valued conformity over individuality and loyalty over life. The horror of Hitler Youth membership was apparent right from the opening. Membership was not a matter of choice, but was entirely compulsory. Curiously, the beginning of the Hitler Youth were considerably more unremarkable. Starting in 1922, the Nazi Party in Munich started the Jugendbund, a youth-based offshoot of the organization. The Weimar Republic after World War I had a fairly prominent collection of youth movements. These would include political movements and ideological ones, for example, the Young Conservatives or the Young Protestants. But these were never geared towards anything fascistic, though the fever surrounding the rising Nazi Party and its leader showed traction like nothing before. Just a year into its running, the Jugendbund had just over 1,000 members. Yet with Hitler's rise and the failed beer hall putsch of 1923, the membership would grow fourfold in just 2 years. 5 years later, in 1930, the membership had ballooned to 26,000. Staggeringly, only 2 years after this, another fourfold increase in membership meant over 100,000 children aged from 14 to 18 were members of the Hitler Jugend. Chancellor Heinrich Brüning would try to halt the time, banning the Hitler Youth movement in 1932. This effort to curb political violence was too little, too late. The Nazis were just a year away from power. In 1933, the membership hit an incredible 2,300,000 members, and the expansion only continued. Given their own Reichsführer in Baldur von Schirach, all youth movements in the country were either closed down or integrated into the Hitler Youth. 3 years later, Hitler Youth was the only recognized youth movement by law, and its recruitment included a junior branch for boys aged between 10 and 14. As membership approached 8 million, conscription was compulsory. Students could be refused diplomas for not joining the organization, would face constant peer pressure, and even be assigned essays on the subject of their lack of membership. Employers began to refuse any young person not a member of the Hitler Youth, and their parents could face an investigation from authorities. Yet the story was not so different for the girls of a Weimar in revolution. The Bund Deutscher Mädel was the League of German Girls, a converse youth organization set up solely to recruit Germany's young women. While it had roots earlier during the Nazi growth in the 1920s, it would not be formally established until 1930. This youth movement for girls had 3 strands. For girls 10 to 14, there was the Young Girls League, and for girls 14 to 18, there was the established league itself. Curiously, the BDM would set up a 3rd strand of the movement in 1938. The Bund Deutscher Mädel Faith and Beauty Society was a voluntary strand of the league, culturing girls between 17 and 21 to fulfill their Nazi ideal. This meant courses in fashion design, home economics, and childcare. Make no mistake from this voluntary element, from 1939 the BDM was compulsory for all girls aged 10 to 18. Nazi indoctrination was all but ensured, and personal choice was robbed. Destruction of minds. Undoubtedly, one of the most significant horrors of life inside the Hitler Youth was the psychological impact of the membership. The Hitler Youth had a doctrine, and they were infamous for indoctrination. Training academies akin to prep schools would take in these young boys and nurture them in all things Nazi ideology. The Aryan superiority and racist mythology of Nazism was consistently imparted to the children. Any of Germany's decline and defeat in World War I was taught as the working of the Jewish people in Europe. Both Slavs and Jewish people were taught as subhuman to these young children. Social classes and traditional distinctions found in German society were overruled in these teachings, and the only authority they were taught to respect was the rule of Adolf Hitler. While there were plenty of classes and teachings from Nazi books and even the singing of Nazi songs, this was not all classroom-based. Having banned the Boy Scouts in 1935, the Nazis would reappropriate many of its activities, but with a twist. What was once camping and hiking turned into combat training, assault courses, and weapons handling. Come 1938, 1.5 million Hitler youth had been trained to fire rifles. The indoctrination of the BDM was somewhat different. These young German girls were being reared to fulfill the projected societal roles of wife, homemaker, and mother. Summer camps, folklore, campfire romanticism, and sports were the main tools used to indoctrinate German girls. However, this training would include the address of their worldview and the enforcement of Nazi racial purity ideas. Young girls of the BDM were warned against defiling their race by coupling with non-Aryan men, and the glorification of the Hitler Youth was consistent with tales told on Hitler Youth martyrs. Physically, the training was rigorous, including track and field sports and even gymnastics. This wasn't to send young girls into war, this was just to promote good health. Arguably the most impactful on a young girl in the BDM was its emphasis on self-sacrifice for something greater than themselves, which the movement served up in droves. Young soldiers and subservience. In a system where their entire education was manipulated, the Hitler Youth were malleable and were being purposefully prepped to be future soldiers in the war. Within the youth movement were different corps granting different foundations of training for the specific roles the young boys would fulfill. For example, the German worker youth specifically taught future technicians and labor leaders all under a Nazi banner. Commonly, these different corps held different weapons training that the youth would go on to wield. Given a horizon and a future, the Hitler Youth would also have its own ranking and uniforms to further cement these young people's identities with the movement. Adorned in black shorts and tan shirts with a rolled black handkerchief, the Hitler Youth had military titles even before reaching the military. From privates to sergeants, from lieutenants to field marshal, German children were rewarded and validated for their commitment to the Hitler Youth. The fanaticism of its young members was a weapon and tool to the Hitler Youth, fully indoctrinated. These young boys were encouraged and often more than keen to inform on any friends and family who were dissident to the Nazi machine. This trend of informing on trusted and loved ones was also familiar in the BDM. Informing on family and friends not conforming to Nazi ideologies was common, creating a climate of distrust and fear. Young adults in the war. Unsurprisingly, the preparation of young adults for future wars came to fruition in World War II. At the start of the war in 1939, the Nazi High Command envisioned the Hitler Youth to be given defense training. Come 3 years later, with German manpower being ever depleted from the brutal toll of war, the Hitler Youth were being drafted into the military reserves. As the war turned in Allied favor in 1944, the appearance of teens on the front lines became ever increasing. The 12th Panzer Division was Hitler Jugend and deployed in the Battle of Normandy 1944. Approximately 20,000 youths were in the ranks, and some 3,000 lost their lives. Infamously, with the war close to lost and military ranks thinner than ever, 12-year-olds would be deployed in the Battle of Berlin, suffering tremendous losses from the oncoming Russian forces. Tragically, by 1945, the Hitler Youth gained a reputation for participating in war crimes, including the execution of prisoners. The outbreak of World War II would also alter the roles of Germany's young girls. Their roles would be significant, albeit in a more background capacity than their male counterparts. BDM girls were often in supportive yet important roles as nurse assistants in hospitals or train stations to tend to the wounded. They would also make significant auxiliary posts and roles such as signal and searchlight operators, flak helpers, and office staff. A chilling chapter of the BDM's wartime service took place in Poland. Having been indoctrinated, the Polish were subhuman. The BDM would oversee the eviction of Poles and educate resettling Germans in the Nazi doctrine. This also included drafting young German boys into the Hitler Youth as its leaders were being drafted into the military. At the same time, Polish girls, viewed as having desirable racial traits, were sent to Germany and made to join the BDM. Known to the domestic population during the war for collecting donations, signing for the wounded, and collecting clothing for the winter relief, the BDM was an undercurrent of the dark Germanization. Life after wartime, altered forever. Life after wartime for these children and youths would only be the most brutal of hardships. Not only was the cause gone, but following World War II, the Allies disbanded both the Hitler Youth and the BDM as unconstitutional and criminal organizations. As the membership was made up of children, war crimes were not pursued against the membership, but their livelihoods were indelibly altered. Historians would come to detail the impact of the being Hitler Youth was damage to the souls of these young people, that in adulthood they came to see that they had been servants to a murderous criminal enterprise that had stolen their childhoods. The young girls of the BDM had an equally difficult and unwinnable path. Across the BDM were instances that senior Nazi officials had exploited and abused young, older BDM members across the rise of Nazism. Then after the war, women once in the League of German Girls would be victims of ostracization and stigma for having been involved in the Nazi cause, for following a path without another choice, in a system that abused you, that vanished once the world collapsed. This is History on Fleek, and we'll see you next time.